This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome. Last night, I stopped into a store to pick up some items on my way home from the office. Now, this is not uncommon. We all have our errands to run at the end of the day. However, as I walked through the store, I came across a promotion for New Coke. It's part of a Netflix promotion that's appearing in all kinds of stores across the country. Now, this promotion for New Coke literally stopped me in my tracks. I'm old enough to remember when New Coke was introduced over 30 years ago and then promptly pulled off the market after 79 days because of the strong and very vocal backlash from loyal Coke customers. Despite the New Coke doing very well in taste tests, and there was extensive market research and market studies done, people's reactions were extremely negative. There were people who claimed that they could figure out that it tasted differently, that they didn't like it. They were loyal to the traditional Coke taste. What I found interesting at the time is TV news programs would run blind tests between the original Coke and the New Coke, and people were like 50-50 being able to figure out which was New Coke. It got so crazy at that time where people were going out and buying the original Coke and hoarding it. Because part of the announcement from Coke is that New Coke would replace Old Coke. They wouldn't have both of them. They would actually go with the New Coke, and Old Coke would go away. And people who were loyal to that Old Coke started hoarding as much Coke as you can. In fact, there were shortages in some parts of the country. Now, the company had to reintroduce the original formula. And then to avoid the confusion about, is this really still the New Coke with just a different label or can? They literally had to go and rebrand the original Coke as Coke Classic. And that effort of trying to introduce that new innovation and Coke trying to produce that new product to bring to market, it ranks up there as one of the top failures for innovation. Now, it goes without saying that not all ideas are good ideas. Not all even good ideas lead to market-winning innovations. There is just so much involved. Sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that while failures will happen, we can learn from those that have gone before us in their attempt to try to bring their idea, turning it into an innovation, and bringing it to market. And that is the topic for today's show. We're going to look at the 5 of the worst innovation failures and to see and discuss what could have been done differently. Now, number 1 on the 5 worst innovation failures on my list is the Apple Newton. Now, in 1993, Apple launched the Newton to much fanfare. The price at the time of launch was $699. That is quite a pricey piece of electronics at that time. Keep in mind, this was 1993. And for my background coming from the consumer electronics world, that is well above what we refer to as the spousal pricing level. And what do we mean by spousal pricing level? You'll find when you go through Best Buy or what used to be Circuit City or even on Amazon that there's a certain category of consumer electronic devices that will try to hit a target price that is just below that level where someone who wants to buy that can buy it on their own decision versus needing to check with the spouse first. Typically in today's market, that works out to be between $250 and $299. As soon as you break over the $300 mark, there's that catch and hesitation of whether or not to commit those dollars without having a conversation and thinking about it. Now, in this case, they priced it at $699 in $1993. So that was a quite pricey item. Now, while I tracked the product when Newton came out and was launched, it was not one that I found myself interested enough to actually go purchase it for myself. Now, I chose not to buy it, and it became quite evident quickly that many others chose not to purchase the Newton also. In my opinion, it tried to do way too much. It was the exact opposite of what we now refer to as an MVP, or a minimal viable product. It was getting at the key there on an MVP or a minimal viable product is to get out early with a minimal set of the most important features and then improve and add features as you go. Now, the Newton also had a category problem. What is it? It's a handheld electronic device. It's got a screen. It's got a little pen you use to draw and sketch on it. But it literally, feature-wide, it tried to do everything. And in effect, was trying to cram pretty much a lot of the features that you would have found in the laptops at the time, all into this handheld device. And they tried to use and develop unique sets of user interfaces. That included handwriting recognition, but they had calendar and contact and sketching apps and games and note-taking and spreadsheets and word processors. And you name it, it had it. Now, years later, I worked with Shane Robinson, who was the chief strategy officer at HP, and he and I worked together quite closely at HP. Shane was at Apple and was on the Newton team. In his office at HP, he had an extremely rare red Newton. So the Newton at the time, the commercial product, was kind of that gray color that all of the Apple products had at the time. And in this case, Shane had a bright red version of it. He said it was his daily reminder to take risks and don't be afraid of the possibility of failure. And in his case, a highly public failure that regularly gets brought up in lists and podcasts as one of the biggest product innovation failures out there. Now, Shane had this in his office, and I used his red Newton as a prop many times when I was pitching Shane on new product ideas. When he would throw out an innovation antibody response, I would reach over, take his red Newton off the shelf, which made him really nervous, and I would remind him of the Newton in the need to take risks. Needless to say, when I used his product failure as a prop, he always folded and backed the idea that I was pitching. Now, the Newton has been credited with maybe being the catalyst for things like the Apple iPad and the whole creating the whole PDA, the personal digital assistant marketplace. But it always gets brought up on this when people look back to say, what were the biggest failures? So what could have been done differently? Are there things that team should or could have thought of to go about that in a completely different way? One was get the hardware right. This thing was fairly bloated, which drove up the cost, which made it not a mainstream product. It became niche just by the cost of the hardware alone. The other is determine what the most important features users are looking for. You don't need to have everything, but what are those top 2-3 features you must have in order to meet the needs of the customers? Calendar, contacts, maybe note-taking, but you don't need to do everything that a laptop. It's a different product. Third is establish a model of continuous innovation of adding features. Have a method of being able to rapidly update the device as the consumer is using that product. So you can add features, you can enhance features, you can improve the product over time so that the user is constantly being pleasantly surprised about the new things that are being introduced. And then the other is only release the features when ready and at the quality the customers expect. For instance, the handwriting feature on the Newton was an absolute bust. It did not work. Following the Newton's introduction, In 1997, Palm, a subsidiary of U.S. Robotics at the time, introduced the Palm Pilot using the lessons learned from the Newton. It focused on creating a minimal viable product, which was calendar contact notes, and it had a calculator in there, and it had one little game in there. It did its core functionality extremely well, rather than trying to do 20 things poorly. The Palm Pilot went on to dominate the emerging PDA market for years. So don't go anywhere. We're going to continue our discussions on the biggest innovation failures and what could have been done differently. And we will be right back after this quick, short commercial break. Number 2 on our list of the worst innovation failures is the Microsoft Zune. In 2006, Microsoft introduced their portable music player, Zune. It was Microsoft's answer to the Apple iPod. And even with a ton of marketing effort, the product never took off. Why? It was what I would call a Me Too product. There was nothing unique about it that would cause someone to switch from using an iPod to taking up the Zune. In my own case, my wife and I both had Zunes. Why? Because Microsoft gave them to us as part of a promotion. My kids, on the other hand, were loyal to their Apple iPods. What most are not aware of is that the Zune device was created by Microsoft in close collaboration with Toshiba, which took the design of the Gigabit S and redeveloped it under the name Toshiba 1089. So, it was really based on somebody else's product, not a Microsoft product. It came from Toshiba. And then they tweaked it for it to become a Microsoft product, which means they really didn't have that option to put in the products and features that they felt their customers would want. Now, I do not have any insider knowledge, but given my experience, the Zune product was created after Microsoft saw the success that Apple was having with the iPod, and someone higher up told the team to hurry up and get something into the market. Thus the partnership with Toshiba and taking one of their products and rushing it to market. And rushing it to market became quite evident with the fact that there was nothing unique about it, and even some of the more basic things did not work. And in fact, it actually had a bug in it that caused it to fail on leap year. And their fix was, you basically had to wait 24 hours where your Zune would not work to wait for the leap year to pass before the clock would work again. Now, in this case, they were trying to rush it to market, but it was quite interesting in a recent or not too long ago Business Insider article about this. The article interview was with Robbie Bach, who has previously led Microsoft's home entertainment and mobile businesses. And his comment was, quote, "The portable music market is gone, and it was already leaving when we started. We just weren't brave enough, honestly, and we ended up chasing Apple with a product that actually wasn't a bad product, but it was still a chasing product. And there wasn't a reason for someone to say, oh, I have to go out and get that thing." And that is right on the money. It was a Me Too product. Microsoft could get a product into the market, not put in the R&D spend to do a product the proper way, and test it. Well, if you're not going to commit, don't even go in and try. Now, the product, albeit, came out in 2006, it hung on for a long time. The product was finally killed off in 2011. Now, if you're a Microsoft customer, you know that Zune as a name stayed on for quite some time to become the name of software before it became Microsoft Groove. Zune was used as a naming for synchronization for a while. And ultimately today, if you went to the old Zoom URL on the browser, it actually points you to Xbox. So, Zune dead in 2011. Now, what could have Microsoft done differently? Now, to win, you need to commit. Taking half a step by introducing a rebranded product is very rarely a winning strategy, because you're taking the quality of what they're done and attaching your name to it. Are you willing to do that? Have you really done the work to understand what your customers' needs and wants are? I'm a big believer that if this is going to be a cornerstone product for you, you need to commit. Now, in some cases, you may acquire a product from somebody else to kind of fill out an entire product catalog. But if it's your product with your brand on it and it's cornerstone to your success and a strategy, you need to commit. The second item that Microsoft could have done differently is if they're going to win against an entrenched leader like Apple with the iPod, then you need to focus on how to out-innovate them. You need to create products and features and capabilities that are not in their product that would compel customers to come to your product. So, that was number 2, Microsoft Zune. Number 3, HD DVDs. In 2006, Toshiba, with the support from Microsoft, launched HD DVD, which was supposed to become the high-def successor to the DVD. Standalone HD DVD players were sold, and Microsoft Xbox 360 had an HD DVD option. Most of us do not recall the HD DVD versus Blu-ray wars. It was a direct repeat of the VHS and Betamax wars. Unfortunately, I cannot forget the HD DVD Blu-ray war. Why? Because when I stepped into the role of CTO at HP, I inherited this mess. It seems HP was an early supporter of Blu-ray and then did an abrupt switch to HD DVD. Now, the switch by HP was because of incentives put in place by Toshiba and Microsoft to entice my predecessor, HP, to back their efforts. When you looked at the user benefits and technology, Blu-ray was and is the superior technology and the superior option. Blu-ray ended up winning the format wars when HP and Warner Brothers announced that they were dumping the HD DVD for Blu-ray in early 2008. And about a month later, Toshiba said it would shut down its HD DVD efforts. So what could have been done differently? 1, HP should not have switched its position based on incentives. It injected confusion into the market, and it impacted its technical credibility with its partners. 2, ecosystem partnerships are critical for most, if not all, major global innovations today. Don't try to jam or force an innovation. The old days of Sony versus Toshiba trying to put a new format out there, or chip processor guys, trying to jam ownership or leadership positions. Today, the decisions are made in the form of an ecosystem. You need to bring all the right players together and find ways to work together while also adding your innovation value to those efforts in order to win. Hopefully, we won't see future versions of this, VHS Betamax or HD DVD Blu-ray battles, but I'm not going to bet on it. My guess is these will continue to happen. So, don't go anywhere. We're going to continue discussing the biggest innovation failures and what could have been done differently. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Number 4 on the list of the worst innovation failures is the Samsung Note 7. There's an old saying in the PR world, there's no such thing as good or bad press as long as they get your name spelled right. Now, I think Samsung would disagree with that kind of old saying when it comes to the Galaxy Note 7 in 2016. Now, disclosure, I am a Samsung house. My TVs are Samsung, my phones are Samsung, and I had a Samsung Note 6 that I loved. None of my Samsung products were given to me, so there's no promo in this conversation. So what can be said about the Galaxy Note 7 that hasn't already been said in the press over the years? The Note 7, one of Samsung's big flagship phones, and big also meaning in sheer size, had a little problem where it occasionally caught fire and exploded. Reminds me of the Dell batteries of 2006. There were many claims of significant damage from the devices, including a car that supposedly was destroyed and a house that burned down by one of the Note 7s catching on fire. It became such big news that out of prudence, the phones were banned on flights. And I remember getting on flights where the boarding agents would make special announcements. If you have a Samsung Note 7, it is not allowed to be brought onto this plane. It cannot be checked into your luggage, etc., etc., etc. So the result was, though, is that when that happened, when it was banned on flights, kind of hard to take a business trip and leave your phone behind. So Samsung had no other option, but they had to recall the entire product line. Now, Samsung's response and handling of the debacle was impressive, and other than the cost of the recall, really hasn't suffered what I would say any kind of long-term impact. Since then, they've shipped the Note 8 and shipped the Note 9 models, and both of them did fairly well. Confidentially, don't tell anybody now, I'm waiting for the new Note 10 to be released later this summer or early fall, per the rumors, to upgrade from my Samsung S8 Plus. Now, there's lots of things that Samsung could have done better with the whole Note activity. One is don't let the schedule dictate the launch. The mobile phone business kind of gets caught in this calendar problem where they have to ship a product on a certain date. The customers expect it. They don't want to miss it because they don't want to signal that they're having problems with the product. Samsung chose the launch date rather than quality, rather than making sure that that product was ready to be shipped. So don't let the schedule dictate the launch. That's number one. Number two, get the quality right. Get the quality right. Particularly when you're talking about mobile devices, whether it's a laptop or mobile phone or whatever, lithium-ion batteries are highly dangerous. It takes a lot of engineering to get it right. And what has happened across this industry with previous fires, whether it be at Dell or whether it be at Samsung, or we've seen it in other cases, buying batteries from third parties where you do not do your own engineering, you're asking for a problem because you're betting on the supply chain versus having your own engineering put behind that so that you could stand behind it. And something as critical as the battery and the risk of fire and explosion, put your own engineering work behind it. 3, look, when you get the quality right, customers will always reward your quality with loyalty. That's what Samsung is banking on. They had a good reputation for high quality for all their products leading up to this one product. And since then, they've been very careful to make sure that the quality is strong. And it has been that quality that has allowed them to maintain the loyalty of their customer base. People did not abandon them. Everybody says, look, someone can mess up once, but we're going to wait and see how they react with the next versions of their phones and products to see if the problem crops up again. And if they can nail it and get over it and have that failure happen once and learn from it, customer loyalty will stick with you. The other is, number 4 on this one, is balance risk of new innovations. They were trying a bunch of new stuff, new processors, new batteries, in order to try to squeeze a little bit more in it. They were speeding up the charging mechanism, which generated heat, which is what caused the batteries to fail. Balance the risk of new innovations. Sometimes a new innovation just needs more maturity in order before you launch it. And the last one is learn from others. Learn from where other people have had their innovation failures. The purpose of why we're doing this show today is to help you keep your eyes open to avoid the failures that others have had. In the case of Samsung, they could have learned from Dell and the problems that Dell had with the fires and explosions. And then Dell itself went through the whole problem of having their laptops barred from certain carriers. Qantas, for an example, if you had a Dell laptop, you were not allowed to have the battery inserted in the laptop. Now, there's lots of reasons why that actually increases your safety by removing the battery, but not the purpose for today's show. So that's number 4, the Samsung Note 7. Now, number 5 of the worst innovation failures is a product I'm going to guess most of you have never heard of. And that is called TwitterPeak. In 2008, Peak introduced a product called TwitterPeak, a hardware device which allows users to send and receive tweets using Twitter. It was the first Twitter-only mobile device. Yes, that's right. All it did was send and receive tweets. Now, the Peak devices were designed in partnership between Peak with IDEO and BYD from the start, which would seem to signal the device would have a strong user design focus, great user experience, user interface, nice industrial design. When you're talking about a firm as prevalent and with such a great reputation like IDEO. Now, TwitterPeak right out of the gate met broad skepticism in the press. In fact, CNN listed it as one of the top 10 biggest technology failures of 2009. And it didn't stop there. Gizmodo went as far as to name TwitterPeak one of the 50 worst gadgets of the decade. That's right, 50 worst gadgets of the decade. Now, Peak took the concept of creating an MVP, a minimum viable product, to the ultimate extreme, and it only did one thing: send and receive tweets. Given the frustration of needing an app for each service, I don't know about you, but on my phone, the idea of having a device for each service seems like an obvious failure. So if you got TwitterPeak just for Twitter, and you have do you get a device that's just for Facebook, and then you have another device that's just for Instagram? No, it makes no sense. Now, the added challenge was that it didn't even do the one thing it was designed to do well. It only displayed a 20-character message preview, which made the user interface basically unusable. You could only read in 20-character segments of the entire message. Peak went on to create hardware devices for email, which did garner a small following as the low-cost alternative to things like the BlackBerry. In 2012, Peak dropped all of its hardware devices to go purely software that it makes available to OEMs. So email clients on some of mobile devices is really based on some of the Peak software. Now, what could they have done differently? 1, be careful of going to extremes. In this case, they went to the extreme of a minimum viable product and totally missed the friction that it was going to cause by forcing people to have multiple devices. Number 2, test and validate. And when you're done testing and validating, test and validate again. Third is, don't outsource everything to the big design houses. You are responsible for how your innovation is manifested into a product or service. The buck stops with you. Now, through today's show, we can learn a lot by failures. Failure is part and parcel of the innovation game. Don't shy away from looking deep into failures to see what can be learned. For some, it's like driving past a car accident. You can't help yourselves by slowing down and looking at an accident. The same occurs when you look at innovation failure. Slow down and look and see what you can learn. Now, don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to have a new episode of 5 Minutes to New Ideas that ties directly into what we are talking about right here. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this quick, short commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Back in the early days of this show, I would share what I called a killer question in each episode. These questions were designed to be used in your personal, team, or organization's innovation efforts. Now, based on feedback from listeners just like you, we've decided to bring it back with some improvements. Each episode of the Killer Innovations has a segment that I'm now calling 5 Minutes to New Ideas. It's designed for the creative mind looking for that next great idea. Each episode will challenge you to think differently about yourself, your business, and your products and services by asking unique, funny, and sometimes crazy questions. These questions are designed to force you to look beyond the obvious and to uncover ideas and opportunities you never before considered. So, get out your notebook and be ready to uncover that game-changing idea. Here is 5 Minutes to New Ideas. I was looking through some of my old idea notebooks and came across a quote that I wrote down. It is one of those quotes that causes you to pause and contemplate, to question your own personal motivations. So what is the quote? Quote, "Institutions, like vineyards, should be judged by the quality of their vintages." End quote. It's worth thinking about, isn't it? Institutions, like vineyards, should be judged by the quality of their vintages. An institution's impact should be measured over time, just as it takes years, if not decades, to truly know what the quality of the vintages of a vineyard. You can apply this quote to business, schools, universities, charities, church, family, or even a country. I, for one, would rather be connected to an organization that puts out a really great product than an organization that's turning out, ordinary products or services. The ability to produce a great product or service is tied to the inherent drive to quality from the team that builds it. There's nothing more important than to instill in ourselves, our children, and grandchildren than a love for quality's sake. We instinctively look for it in others and admire it when we find it. We want it from people who deliver the products and services we use. We want it in the education of our children, in the medical care we receive, in the food we eat, in the car we drive, in the clothes we wear, in the books and newspapers we read, and even in the podcasts we listen to. Quality puts the value into everything, and because we admire it so much, we should most certainly demand it of ourselves in everything we do, because it is what gives us the value that others want from us. But we must not stop at ourselves, but help those around us to recognize the importance of quality. The result would be to rise up quality to the benefit of everyone. Now, this reminds me of a story. Now, I grew up in Illinois where we are famous for our super sweet corn. So, we know a thing or two about corn. There was once a farmer who grew award-winning corn. Each year, he entered his corn in the state fair where it won a blue ribbon. One year, a newspaper reporter interviewed him and learned something interesting about how he grew it. The reporter discovered that the farmer shared his seed corn with his neighbors. How can you afford to share your best seed corn with your neighbors when they're entering corn in competition with yours each year? The reporter asked. "Why, sir," said the farmer, "didn't you know? The winds pick up pollen from the ripening corn and swirl it from field to field. If my neighbors grow inferior corn, cross-pollination will steadily degrade the quality of my corn. If I am to grow good corn, I must help my neighbors grow good corn." He was very aware of the connectedness of life. His corn could not improve unless his neighbor's corn also improves. The lesson for each of us is this: if you are going to grow corn, we must help our neighbors grow that good corn. So, it is with our lives. If we are to improve our quality, we need others around us to improve theirs. And quality is not limited to just the high-profile jobs. There are no unimportant jobs. There isn't a job of any sort where the quality will not reflect on the person performing the task. Quality is not something you can fake. Time exposes the lack of quality like a geological strata of a canyon. Someone who does not deliver quality to the level expected will be found out. People instinctively know and respect quality when they find it, and turn away when they are disappointed when they don't find the quality they expected. So are you delivering the quality in everything you do? Are you helping those around you deliver quality? Or are you trying to get by with just delivering the minimum required? Joe Weldon said it best, quote, "When you value is what you think and talk about, and what you think and talk about is what you become." Thus, why am I talking about quality? You and I need to hold ourselves and each other to the expectation that high quality is what we will deliver in everything we do. Before you say something is done, you need to ask yourself, is this up to my standards of quality? And because quality is more of a journey than a destination, you should never stop asking yourself, how can I improve on the quality of what I do? This is Phil McKinney, and thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you have any comments or suggestions, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. Beyond this show, I write about my personal experiences of being in the innovation game for the last 2 decades. Topics include innovation, creativity, culture, team building, metrics, frustrations, leadership, and how to win. You can find that content over at philmckinney.com. You can also find out information about my book, Beyond the Obvious, including extensive excerpts over at beyondtheobvious.com. You can find hardcover, digital, and audio versions of my book on Amazon or wherever you get your books from. Now, the reason I started this show back in 2005 was to pay back my early mentor. My first mentor, Bob Davis, invested an immense amount of time in training and coaching me, which had a major impact on my career. When I went back and asked him how I could pay him back, he laughed and said I couldn't. I had to pay it forward. If I could ask for a favor, could you help me pay it forward? How? 1, by giving us a rating wherever you get your podcast, as that helps spread the word. And 2, by telling others about the show. If you want to be part of the conversation between the shows, I hang out in the Innovators community on Slack. The Innovators community is a private community of vetted innovators who help each other succeed. Check it out at theinnovators.community. This episode of Killer Innovations was produced by the Innovators Network. You can find the show notes and the entire show catalog going back to 2005 at killerinnovations.com. I'll talk to you next week, and in the meantime, go out and change the world with your killer innovation. Bye-bye.